I staged the whole thing, that's what nobody understands. I angled my phone, typed "I miss us" to my ex, and waited for my boyfriend to read it over my shoulder. I knew he would. I didn't know he'd vanish. Now his family calls daily, the police want my phone records, and I'm cornered. The truth that I needed an exit, that the text was my coward's escape plan, makes me worse than unfaithful. It makes me look calculated in a way nobody forgives. So here's everything: the life insurance, the fake email, why I was really at my ex's apartment. But you need to understand what brought me to that restaurant booth first. The Tuesday night began like any other date night we'd manufactured to prove we were fine. Jake ordered the osso buco, his predictable comfort choice when he sensed tension. I watched him saw through the meat, and thought about how I'd studied his patterns, every twitch and habit, the way his left eye tightened when he suspected something. I'd become an anthropologist of his suspicion, which meant I'd become an expert in my own deception. We'd been together 4 years, lived together for 3, and for the past 8 months I'd been dying inside while performing the role of a woman planning her future. The fertility clinic appointments were the worst. I went through the motions, dutifully marked my ovulation calendar, took the vitamins that made my stomach cramp. Jake had no idea I'd been sterilized at 22 after a pregnancy I couldn't carry to term. He thought we were building something. I knew we were living on borrowed time. That night, I placed my phone at the 47-degree angle I'd practiced in my bathroom mirror. The screen brightness maxed out. The text message app opened to Caleb's name. My hand steady as I typed 3 words I'd rehearsed 17 times. When Jake's fork paused midair, when I felt his breath change rhythm behind me, I knew he'd seen it. The osso buco went uneaten. He stood, dropped his napkin on the plate like a white flag, and walked out of the restaurant without his jacket. The server asked if everything was all right. I smiled and said, "Just a disagreement, he'll be back." Maybe if he'd just accused me of cheating, this would be easier. A screaming match, a thrown glass, those injuries heal. But he gave me silence, and silence expands into every crack. I sat there for 40 minutes, picking at his cooling dinner, refreshing my phone. No text from Jake, no missed calls. I paid the bill using the joint credit card he'd be checking later, a final breadcrumb of normalcy, and ordered a rideshare home. The driver played a true crime podcast about a husband who disappeared. I almost laughed. Jake wasn't in the apartment. His toothbrush stood in the holder, his work laptop on the desk. Nothing packed, no note, just absence. I poured a glass of wine and called Caleb. "It worked," I said. "He's gone." Sending the text wasn't the real betrayal. The betrayal was marrying Jake while keeping that secret about Durham. The text was just punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd been writing since our wedding day. By midnight, Jake's mother called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her voice, tight with worry. "Maya, honey, is Jake with you?" He texted something strange about needing space. "Is everything okay?" I crafted my response like a scholarship essay, all precise emotion and controlled concern. "We're going through a rough patch. He left dinner upset. I'm sure he'll call you when he calms down." She believed me because I sounded like the Maya she'd known for years, steady, reliable, the anchor for her impulsive son. The detective who showed up Thursday morning was younger than I'd expected. He asked for Jake's recent photos, his known associates, whether he'd been depressed. I handed over a curated selection: Jake smiling at his sister's wedding, Jake hiking, Jake looking stable and present. I omitted the ones where his eyes looked hollowed out, the months he'd stopped sleeping. "He's been stressed about work," I admitted, but nothing unusual. When the detective asked to see my phone, I handed over my primary device without hesitation. He didn't ask about the second one, but they didn't find the third phone. The one Jake didn't know about, the one registered under my dead mother's name, the one that only ever called Caleb. The missing person story went live on social media Friday afternoon. Someone Jake's sister probably posted his photo with the caption, "My brother has been missing since Tuesday. Last seen leaving a restaurant downtown, if anyone has information." The comments filled with theories. The restaurant released security footage, grainy and damning, me sitting alone, Jake's retreating back. "Looks too calm," someone wrote. "Check the wife first, always." I logged into Jake's email that night using the password I'd watched him type dozens of times, deleted every message from the private investigator he'd hired, emptied the trash, archived the ones from his lawyer about filing for separation. I'd known about the separation papers 3 weeks before he did. The investigator's last report mentioned Durham, 2016, a sealed juvenile record. I'd paid good money for that sealing. Caleb reminded me of the Durham Pact when I called him, panicked. "We agreed," he said, his voice metallic through the speaker. "If either of us was ever exposed, the other would bury it. You texted me, that was the signal. I didn't correct him. I'd meant the text for Jake, not Caleb. But some wires cross and start fires, and some fires save you from harder truths. The police brought me in for a formal interview on Monday. Detective Chen slid a printed screenshot across the table, my text to Caleb, timestamped 8:47 p.m. You told us you hadn't spoken to your ex in years, Mrs. Ellison. I looked at the evidence of my own handwriting and felt the floor tilt. I wasn't thinking clearly, I was upset. People do stupid things when they're unhappy. The words tasted like copper. My best friend Tessa brought soup on Wednesday, but she brought questions too. Maya, the police asked me about Jake's mental health. They think he might have. She couldn't finish. I stirred the broth and said, he was fine, we were fine. She watched me like I was a math problem that wouldn't solve. You haven't cried, she observed. Not once. I told her I was numb, which was true. Numbness is what happens when you've spent months anesthetizing yourself against consequences. The call came Thursday while Tessa was still there. Jake's mother had collapsed, chest pains, stress-induced. The hospital said she'd recover, but Tessa's face when she looked at me, like I was the source of contamination, not just a carrier, made me realize my support system was a mirage. She left the soup but took her belief in me with her. Detective Chen called the next day. We found his car, abandoned at the state park. I knew that park. We'd hiked there the weekend after our engagement. Was there any? I couldn't say the word blood. Chen was quiet. Just his phone, wallet, nothing else. Mrs. Ellison, did you want your husband dead? I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. I wanted him to leave me, there's a difference. But sitting in the silence after the call, I wasn't sure. Caleb's voice on my burner phone sounded different that night. You know what has to happen now, Maya, they're going to keep digging. We need to give them an ending. I gripped the phone and stared at the wall where Jake's photography had hung. I already gave them an ending. He left because I texted my ex. Caleb's sigh was weary. That's a beginning, not an ending. Endings involve bodies. The Durham story spilled out of me in the interrogation room 2 days later, prompted by a photograph they'd found in Jake's locked desk drawer. A newspaper clipping about a 17-year-old girl killed in a hit-and-run, 2016. My face, younger, in the background of the crime scene photo. I was in the car, I said, and the words felt like exhaling glass. Caleb was driving. We were drunk. We left her there. Detective Chen didn't blink. You were a minor. Statute of limitations is complicated. I shook my head. You don't understand. Jake wasn't leaving because of an affair. He was leaving because he'd figured it out. The insurance policy was the detail that made Chen's partner lean forward. You took out a $2 million life insurance policy on your husband 6 months ago. I'd forgotten about that, or tried to. Jake wanted it, for the mortgage. The partner slid the paperwork across. Signature alone, Mrs. Ellison, Jake never knew. The policy rode the line between motive and madness. I'd taken it out when I first suspected he was digging, a parachute made of money. Caleb's arrest came that evening. They found him at his apartment, packing. In his trunk, Jake's hiking boots, clean but mud-caked from the state park. The confession took 3 hours. He'd met Jake there, told him about Durham, offered him money to drop the investigation. Things escalated. A push, a fall, a rock. Texted me, Caleb said in his statement. She gave me the go-ahead. The district attorney explained my legal position the next morning. Conspiracy required intent. My lawyer argued I never meant for violence, just for Caleb to talk to Jake. But in the quiet before I sent that text, I'd known exactly what Caleb was capable of. I'd known because I'd seen it in Durham, watched him rationalize leaving a girl bleeding on asphalt. Some knowledge is a choice, and I'd chosen to weaponize it. The civil suit filed by Jake's mother named me as co-conspirator in wrongful death. The insurance company froze the payout. My employer, a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth, fired me for moral turpitude. The press called me a black widow without the spider aesthetic. But the consequence I hadn't anticipated came via a Facebook message from a woman whose profile picture showed her holding a diploma. I'm Sarah Chen. My sister was the girl in Durham. I need to ask you. Did she say anything? Before, she thought knowing would bring peace. I knew it would only transfer her grief into rage. I spent 3 weeks in a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, answering questions about remorse. The doctor noted my flattened affect, my tendency to intellectualize. Do you feel responsible for Jake's death? She asked. I told her about causality, about the butterfly effect, about how sending a text wasn't the same as swinging a rock. She wrote something down. That's not what I asked, she said. The truth was, I felt responsible for Jake's death the moment I chose my juvenile record over his right to know who he'd married. Everything after was just mechanics. Now I live in a studio above a laundromat, paid for by my sister's pity and a GoFundMe I didn't ask for. The civil trial starts in 6 days. Jake's sister's letter arrived last Tuesday, handwritten on stationery I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. I don't care about the money, it read. I just need to know if he suffered. The paper smelled like her vanilla perfume, the scent of a life I'd borrowed and returned damaged. I'm telling this story now because someone needs to understand that I didn't start with murder. I started with a lie small enough to hold that I could outrun Durham, that I could build a life on top of a grave and the foundation would hold, that if I made Jake leave me, I wouldn't have to watch him realize he'd married a ghost. Judge me. Call me a coward who hired a killer with 3 words. But understand, this I missed the us that could have existed if I hadn't been busy burying the person I was. The text was true, just not the way anyone thinks. I missed the us that existed before I knew what I was capable of. I missed being someone who could sit in a restaurant and not calculate angles, not see every exit as an opportunity, not understand that some doors only open onto more darkness. The jury will decide if I'm a murderer. I've already decided what I am: a woman who chose her own survival over her husband's life and discovered there the same thing. So when you read about the trial, when you see my face beside Jake's, remember that I didn't just text my ex. I texted my past, and it answered.